Hello, I'm Rob Doherty and this is the FTSVS podcast, Executive Edition, supported by Liberary Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, animation consultant for Film London. In this series we'll be chatting to the big hitters in the animation industry and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and, I hope, get to meet the person behind that executive title. Bonjour et bienvenue dans un autre épisode. Today's guest is Philippe Alessandri, a gentleman whose life seems to have been immersed in media, from being a teenage TV presenter and creating his own comic strips to senior roles in some of Europe's largest animation studios, to now running his own Watch Next Media. As if that wasn't enough, Philippe is also the chairman of the Animation in Europe Federation, a busy man to whom we are very grateful for giving his time and his insights. À toi, Julian.
Philippe, thank you so much for finding the time to join us here on the FTSVS podcast. You've been the CEO and owner of Paris-based Watch Next Media since 2015. You've got studios in Paris and Lille in France and the Animato studio in Italy. And on top of that, you're the president of Animation Europe, which is the Federation of Animation Producers Associations within the EU. But before you get into animation, looking back at age 17, you were still at high school, you were a host on France 3's Southern Regional TV station. How did that come about? And did you decide that maybe being a TV host was not the career for you?
Well, I have to say that I enjoyed very much being a TV host when I was 17 because that was in the previous century. At that time, there were only 3 TV channels in France. And so everybody would see you on TV and I would be invited to every party. So that was like a dream. But at the same time, I had a passion for drawing. I was creating comic strips and publishing them sometimes. So I wanted to become a comics artist, really. My parents were against that and advised me to do serious studies. So I did study political science and thinking I would work in TV. And after I finished my studies, I had the chance to be interviewed by Saban, the animation producer. And when I walked in the animation studio, I suddenly realized that maybe I could combine 2 passion, TV and drawing at the same time.
That's really interesting. I mean, you mentioned 2 things there. I mean, political science, which I do wonder a little bit that maybe as you look into co-productions between 3 or 4 European territories and maybe a North American studio and everything else, I would imagine being political science would come into play quite a lot with that.
Absolutely. And I would say political science, the fact that I studied political science, it's probably the reason why I invested so much time and energy in a Producers Association without being paid for it. Being the chairman of the French Producers Association for during 6 years and then founding really animation in Europe and sharing it until now. It's because I really love to get an overall picture of our industry and not just be selfish and working for my own company.
I wonder, we have a phrase in English which is a glutton for punishment. I don't know if that translates into French, but it sounds a little bit like running all that massive organization. You're a bit of a glutton for punishment.
I get it.
I want to take you back to something else you mentioned. You mentioned publishing comic strips when you were younger as well. Were any of those comic strips inspired by animated features or TV series that you watched when you were younger?
I have to say not really, because at that time we had a lot of Disney stuff or cartoony stuff like the Hanna-Barbera series. There were also the Japanese anime just arriving in France. But regarding my comic creation, I was closer to the comics that you could have in Mads, the magazine, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you mentioned Japanese anime there. Was that something that was big in France?
Oh yeah, it was huge. because TF1 went private, sorry, in the late 1980s, and they decided to open the morning slots. And some of these morning slots will naturally address the kids, and they were looking for a huge content, a huge volume of content, and so they acquired Japanese anime, which became very popular because they were so different in the aesthetic, but also in the storytelling. They were more mature than the American shows or the European shows that we would get to see. That they became immensely popular, and I think that if France is now becoming also famous for being able to copy and adapt the anime style. In Los Angeles, they say franime, which is a contraction between French and anime. It's because the generation of artists today have been grown up with Japanese anime.
And what made TF1 go for Japanese anime? Was there a particular reason? I mean, you said that they opened up the slots, which was sort of more aimed at younger audience, and animation seemed to fit into that. But why TF1 and anime?
I think it's because there was an existing volume of animation series that were affordable to them. Whereas, I mean, you have to, back in these days, European animation was really, really poor. I mean, there was very few series produced every year, and they were not traveling that much. So you had the American series, and probably uh, these series would be expensive, and there would be some kind of competition with other broadcasters. And so TF1 realized that Japanese anime could fill in the grids, the slots, without spending a fortune.
So it's almost like the commercial, the business, the financial need to find content that was less expensive than producing it themselves filled a slot and opened up this whole new aesthetic, creative interest for French society.
Absolutely, and it's because the first series aired on TF1 were so successful that TF1 decided to acquire even more.
Wow, okay, that's really interesting. Now you mentioned that your first proper job in animation was with Saban, and I think were you a production manager at Saban to start?
Well, actually, I was hired as a production
Okay.
assistant, but because I was working with an American director who was sent from Los Angeles by Saban, and who, of course, couldn't speak any word in French, and at that time, even the young artists in France were not that fluent in French. So I used to do more than I was supposed to do, acting as a production manager from time to time, although I was completely lacking of experience. And that was a very, very good experience because I was talking to the creative team and the executive producers in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I was also talking to the toy company in New York because it was a toy driven show. So that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned the toy company in New York having working with them closely. Again, speaking personally as a producer, I've always felt that the comments, the thoughts that a toy company might have on a project are relevant. A lot of producers, I think, sort of resist the, I suppose, perceived interference of a toy company in the development and creation of animation. But actually, the toy companies are creating product that they hope will engage with exactly the same audience that the animation producers trying to create and engage with.
I completely agree with you. I think our job is to create characters and universe that will translate into many media, and toys are being part of it. Toys are the way to extend the experience of kids' audience on a show that they like. I think that this opposition comes from the broadcasters,
Mhm.
public broadcasters, at least in France. But I think it's the same almost everywhere in the world. Public broadcasters in the past years have um, ch- considered that toy-driven show would be commercials and that they should not invest into it. But I think it's our mutual interest to build partnership around common series and brands.
It's curious, isn't it? Because certainly the public service broadcasters in the UK would see an animated series based on a book, adapted from a book, as completely acceptable. But a television series that maybe has been driven by a toy franchise is somehow not acceptable. It's a curious sort of difference in opinion just based on, I suppose, how commercial that product is seen to be. Obviously, toys are seen to be much sort of more commercially driven than maybe books are.
I agree with you, and I made recently the experience with Hello Kitty Superstar. Except Rai, Yo-Yo in Italy, and Clan in Spain, all other public television have passed on the show, which has been aired in Super Hotel in Germany, Tiny Pop in the UK. So commercial networks really competed with each other to get it.
Mhm.
But public service didn't, although they liked the project and acknowledged the quality of the series, said no, it's too commercial for us. Even if there was no toy plan tied in with the series.
It's interesting, isn't it? And this is a question you don't have to answer, but I wonder sometimes whether those public service broadcasters should maybe actually stand up and say, actually, we recognise that the children, the audience, really engage with the toys. As you said earlier on, Philippe, it's an extension of engagement with the characters and the storylines. And if you look at things like Roblox now, where children are taking stuff that's been created by an animation studio and then creating their own worlds revolving around that. It's actually no different. It's the same kind of thing. Taking the toys, the characters, and playing with them and making their own stories and things like that. But I don't know how. Politically, I guess it's too again an English phrase, too hot a potato for them to do that.
I know that phrase. Yes. Well, I think it's the right moment to change our mindset and to say we're not against um, shows with marketing plan attached, as long as the narrative, the content remains king. We don't want to have to compromise on the content. Several times in my professional life, working on toy driven show, I had to talk to the toy company and explain them how important it was to keep the narrative sincere, intense, and not to compromise on showing too often the toys on screen. Because if the content is not good enough, it won't be successful, and then everything falls apart. And they understand that. So it's just to find the right balance between the toy experience and the content itself.
And I would imagine through that the right partner with the toy company
Sure.
who respects and understands, your perspective and your thoughts as a content creator. That you're trying to make things better, not complicate things, really. Um,
Yeah.
and looking back at your resume, you've had some very very senior roles at some of the biggest names in animation. I mean, Telemage, Marathon, GTV, Zodiac. You were running these companies, but in 2015 you left Zodiac and founded Watch Next Media, and then 2 years after that you set up your own distribution company, Kids First. What was the inspiration, the driving force that made you go out on your own?
I guess I always wanted to become an entrepreneur, but I was too shy to do it right away. So I've waited to have a lot of experience, and after 20 years working for other groups, I felt that I had enough connection with the industry and enough knowledge of the business start my own company. And at that time, Zodiac started to go for its fourth merger and its fourth management change. And that was maybe one too many for me.
Mm.
The reporting within the group became very heavy. And I realized how much time and energy I had to spend on reporting to the management, and also into the politics within the group. And so I decided that was the right time for me to set up my own company. I also shared my share of Teleimage, which gave me some kind of autonomy
Mhm.
to start my own business.
And I would imagine, I mean, from looking back at your past and the comic strips and various other things that you've done, despite the fact that you've sort of been very senior and running the management of these studios, it strikes me that you're still a very, very creative oriented person.
I try to remain creative, although I think I used to be more creative than I am now.
Mhm.
I have to confess, because uh, creation is also, but you need youngsters to create, because they get the excitement that you sometimes lose. They can get excited for a show with, oh, okay, we will have ghosts, and we have a group of teenagers fighting ghosts, and say, well, I've done that 20 years ago already. And I'm not that excited anymore. But they have this kind of excitement that you need. And also the code of the creative are changing. It's difficult of course you adapt, but it's difficult to follow the trend, as well as if you were still 20 or 30 years old. And I like this dialogue with, when I set up Watch Next, I could have decided to work with my fellows, people of my age at that time, 40 something.
Mhm.
But I said, no, I want to work with youngsters. And my two main uh, fellows are, when I hired them, one was 26 and the other one was 29, and they are now in their 30s. And I don't regret that. And the dialogue we have together, so they are excited by something. And I said, well, I've done that, it didn't work, so be careful, let's check that out. That is really, really good.
No, I get it because you've obviously, you've got more than 300 hours under your belt of TV series and some animated, some several animated feature films that you've created and produced, and I can understand that the experience that you bring from having made all these shows and shows that work, and I'm sure a couple of shows that maybe didn't work. Coupled with that sort of energy of those younger people is a fantastic sort of pit of excitement and energy and stuff. So where are you getting ideas from at the moment, and what sort of ideas excite you and make you think this could work in the market?
Um, in terms of desire and excitement, new form of storytelling are interesting to me. Serialized series, for example. At the moment, we are finishing the development with France Television of a show called Dungeons and Kittens that we pitched at last Cartoon Forum. And I mean, during the last 20 years, I was unable to develop a serialized project because broadcaster will reject it from the beginning. They would say, no, we want self-contained series. So that's one. Then adult animation, of course,
Mhm.
is really exciting for us because for years we have tried to convince broadcasters to go for adult animation, and it's just starting now. It's very low and very slow, but it's starting. So we have a project in adult animation, and I have to say that brands are exciting to me because I used to produce a lot of originals. I was not so much interested into brands, and the evolution of the market pushed me to consider more and more trying to option brands or famous books. And when we did Hello Kitty, I find it really interesting because that was really challenging. It's not a character from a book. There is no story around Hello Kitty. There is no universe. So you have to invent everything. But still, if you invent something which is wrong with a character,
Mhm.
people would say, "No, this is not." And it's like, what's wrong? The people can't explain, but they would say, no, this is not the DNA of the character. So it's really challenging, and making that adaptation a success. So we will try to find more brands. It's useful for the business, but also creatively it's challenging.
Well, that's interesting again that you say that, because over the last, I suppose, year, as I've been out talking to networks at the Kid Screen and Annecy and Cartoon Forum, etc., I keep hearing back what we want is legacy IP. We're not so keen on original ideas right now. We want something that the audience will recognise already somehow. And some people see that as a a bit depressing, because it's like, well, it's been there for a long time. But it sounds like what you're saying is actually taking something which is not your traditional legacy IP in something like Hello Kitty, because it doesn't have a story attached to it, is actually creatively very exciting.
Yeah, I think so. And also, even when you take a book to the screen, especially when it's a 50 years old book, you have to adapt it to your time. So there is also a creative effort. And so yeah, no, I'm not at all against adaptation. What is a bit sad if our business will go to 100% of adaptation and have no room left for original creation. That will be really sad. But we are not there yet.
No, I thankfully I agree with you.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Liberi Consulting. Liberi offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at libericonsulting.com. That's LIBERI consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
You've been working in the animation industry for quite a while, and you must have seen a lot of changes and trends and animation production and where ideas come from. And obviously, we've got AI on the scene, and there were 4 films in the Annecy Festival which were created using, I quote, generative AI and other techniques. Plus, older children are looking more and more to YouTube. We mentioned Roblox earlier and new digital platforms for their content. Stepping back in a broad picture, how do you view the current state of the industry? And again, in broad terms, where do you see it heading?
I believe that artificial intelligence will be strong and will be used a lot in the animation industry. It will change radically the way we produce, and maybe more the way we produce than the way we create, because we are already using artificial intelligence to create mood boards,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't create the design of a series or a movie with artificial intelligence, because they reproduce what exists
Yeah.
already. And what makes your project unique is something different. But it's true that when I started in animation, mood board will be done with newspaper cut out, and we will stick pictures and drawings to show what we would like to achieve. And now it's easier because artificial intelligence make that available in a few hours or a few days. Uh, Now, I think artificial intelligence will be very useful to automatize the production process,
Mm-hmm.
which will save a lot of time to our artists, which will be able to concentrate more on the quality of the acting, for example, which is more subtle. And we are developing internally at Watch Next a few tools. They are quite limited at the moment, but they help us. For example, we have an automatic animation tool for lip sync and dialogues. So you import the dialogues, and the mouse are animated automatically. By having this tool developed internally, our animators can focus more on the acting, and the quality can increase while keeping the budget the same.
Yeah, and so it sounds a bit like you do see AI as an opportunity for studios if it's used in the right way. And I think a lot of people's fears are exactly what you said, which is despite everyone saying, "Oh, it's you know, creatively generated by," it's not. It's plucking stuff that already exists out of the internet, out of the ether, and reformatting it and everything else. But it does sound a little bit like you see it as an opportunity to allow people to be more creative by taking out some of the more, I don't know, sort of mundane's not the right word, but it's sort of the more ordinary parts of what they need to do to allow them to spend time being more creative in other areas.
Absolutely. Now, you were talking about YouTube. Also, YouTube, it's an interesting case because there is, of course, a great added value to YouTube, which is the possibility for us to test new projects. You can upload a teaser and suddenly see the reaction of the audience. You can also exploit your catalog. Even if broadcasters don't want to renew the rights, you can still generate some revenues. But at the same time, there's a risk associated to YouTube because they are getting a huge share of the audience,
Mhm.
but at the same time, they are not investing into the production of original content. And they are competing with those commissioning broadcasters, which actually pay for the production of original series. So the solution for me is to force YouTube to invest into original production. And that is one of our main goal as animation in Europe. It is to convince the European Commission that the mandatory investment, which is more and more, which exists in more and more countries, should also apply to YouTube. For the moment, YouTube is protected by its definition of user generated content provider,
Mhm.
not SVOD platform, not a broadcaster. So they say, so we should not have mandatory investment, but they are a video service, and that's what counts. So they should be part of this mandatory investment in Europe.
I mean, this sort of leads us quite nicely into your role as president of Animation Europe, because it sounds like what correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're doing with that is taking a more of a, you mentioned earlier on about studying political science and how useful that was, but you're taking on more of a sort of a political lobbying role as the president of that association to lobby for exactly that, the change in how a video platform like YouTube is perceived and how they're getting round some of the quotas and investment requirements that traditional platforms, albeit the digital, are having to adhere to.
Absolutely. We set up animation in Europe in 2015, so less than 10 years ago, and I think we have achieved quite a lot so far. First of all, we have now 23 country members of the federation, 21 coming from the European Union, and two others, Norway and United Kingdom. Altogether, this represents more than 500 production company and studios across Europe. That is significant. And we have three main goals. The first one is to help build this European community of animation. Make sure that people know each other, talk to each other, exchange experiences, um, inspire each other. Um, Maybe also in terms of regulation in each country. That is the first goal. Then the second goal is to secure the public financing because uh, very regularly public financing is at stake in Europe. There is a threat over tax credits, over grants, and so on and so on, coming from the European Union, which doesn't like that. So we try to convince the policymakers that grants, public investment, tax credits are really useful to the animation sector, and make them aware the importance of this sector, which is addressing, by the way, the new generation. And the third goal is to try and convince the policymakers that because the main clients of animation are Americans, we need to find a way to force them to invest into the creation of European originals. Uh, so we have succeeded in a few countries. Out of the 27 countries in the European Union, now 14, which is more than half, 14 countries have implemented this obligation. In even liberal countries such as the Netherlands have a 5% obligation for the platforms. So I think we are doing well, but there's still a lot to do.
Sure, sure. I mean, I want to move on to something else which is connected to this. And in English, we sometimes say we need to talk about the elephant in the room, which I think, having done 750 days on Duolingo, translates into French as "Parlons du sujet qui fâche." Is that right?
Yes,
Good.
absolutely.
I've been building up to that all the way through this conversation. I feel so much better now. But obviously, since the UK left the EU and created Europe, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't met a producer in the UK who thought that was a good idea. We've got new tax incentives in the UK with our AVEC and the independent film tax credit. Is co-producing with a UK studio still interesting to you and your members?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because UK is like France, and it's like France actually, and maybe to a lesser extent Italy and Spain. One of these unique countries in Europe where you have everything. You have broadcasters and platforms investing real money, um, public money, tax credits, as you said, also a little bit of BFI from time
Mhm.
to time. Um, and also, you have a community of artists. So you have everything to produce. And what was lacking, I think, before, maybe it's paradoxal because since Brexit, I find that British producers are opening up much more than they used to. And at the moment, I can tell you, Watch Next Media has three projects in co-production with UK producers. One in development with BBC Studios, one in production with Bicus,
Mhm.
called Big Lizard for CBBS. And we are finishing the third season of Boy Girl Duck Atmos Cheese with BBC and Cavalier. Well, they are Irish, but
That's okay. We forgive them for being
that's
Irish.
okay.
Well,
And we want to do more. We want to do more with
brilliant,
the
and
UK.
that's really encouraging to know, because I think, you mentioned Cartoon Forum earlier on, and obviously at the moment we can't actively participate as lead producers, but we last Cartoon Forum last September, there was a big initiative, UK Animation Meets Europe, which I think it should have maybe been UK Animation Remeets Europe. I don't know, but I certainly got a sense that there was a lot of interest from European producers to work with us, and it's really not us as the UK. You know, we want a partner. We don't want to take anything away from producers in Europe. We want to sort of say how can we work together? What can we bring to the table that is of use to you guys to make this work?
Oh, I think you have. There is a lot of creativity in the UK. a lot of wonderful writers, and even when we are not co-producing with the UK, we like here at Watch Next to work with British writers.
Mhm.
Um, so no, you have a lot to offer. I think it's about there is a kind of secret rule in in co-production, which is that you have to do your own project but also do the others project. So
Mhm.
you can't be only majority co-producers, so you have also to consider minority co-producer, and it's finding this balance that will make the Franco-British relationship really, really good, I'm sure. And by the way, if we team up with a British studio before pitching Cartoon Forum, then we can pitch our project together.
Yeah.
We show that we are a 50-50 co-production, even if it's changed after for Cartoon Forum. But at least for Cartoon Forum, this will be enough to apply.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's a little bit of the UK studios having to accept that they can't be the lead producers, but that's really what co-production is about. It's a partnership, not one person taking the lead and the other person being, slightly lower. And I think it's interesting that you say since Brexit, God, that word still sticks in my mouth, but um, since that happened, there's actually been more initiatives, more people saying we want to find ways of working with you, which is really, really encouraging. There was something else you mentioned just then about the talent that the UK has. And we've been talking a little bit sort of one way about sort of stuff coming into the UK. Do you see a time, a way that UK talent could find jobs with European studios? Do you think there's a way that, I mean, looking at say Festivus as an example, which has its job board, but it's a lot of UK jobs. Do you ever see a time when maybe a French studio or an Italian studio could be advertising jobs on a UK job site?
Of course, it is our common interest that the artists will travel across Europe,
Mhm.
because every time we have foreigners, whatever country they come from, they come with their own methodology, and we learn from them. And also when they go back to the country, they teach the other studio about our methodology, and more we are getting closer together using the same tools, the same terminology. So sharing experience is very good. And yes, I think we should have one website, one application to communicate all together.
That's really, really interesting. And I think, well, I'm sure there's a lot of very talented people here in the UK who would love that opportunity of going across to Europe and working with European animators, because you have such incredible training like Grubbelout and places like that,
Mm.
which are very different to the university training that a lot of our animators have. More art schools and longer courses, and so I think it'd be lovely to think there was a great exchange of creativity, and talent, and views and inspiration.
Absolutely. But I can give you one example. We have been working in the past 5 years with a Bulgarian studio.
Hmm.
And the reason why we are working with them as a service studio first, then as a minor co-producer, because we like them and wanted them to have even a small share in of the pie. It's because they have been educated in London or in Bristol, can't remember,
Hmm.
but then they have been working on Cartoon Network shows like Gumball, for example. And so after a while, they decided to go back to the country and set up a studio there. So that's how the experience learned in one country can benefit to another country in Europe, and that's what makes the European dream wonderful.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the European dream. I really. We've sort of looking towards the end of our conversation now, and sort of looking back at your professional life. I wanted to ask you two or three sort of, again, sort of broad questions. What do you think the best piece of creative or business advice is that you have given to somebody else?
Oh, I remember then when I went to my first MIP, I met with, at that time, I think he was still president of Dick, Andy Edwards.
Yeah.
And I started to pitch my show. And after a while, I was too long. And he said, "Don't tell me the story, tell me how to sell it." And that was the best lesson of pitch. So it's the pitch. A successful pitch is how much you can tell about the story and the characters, but also the added value of your project in comparison to other projects and what's existing on the market.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's the art of the pitch is often undervalued, I think, and I've sometimes pitched alongside somebody else, and because of I'm an executive producer, I'm not the creative producer, so I let the creative producer do the pitch, and I'm watching the person that we're talking to, and you just see their eyes begin to close, and you think, "Yeah, this is not going well." So what, again, looking back, you're age 17, you're a TV host on France 3, and you're doing comic strips. What advice would you have given yourself then, do you think, knowing where you are now?
I would have told me, try to be equally closed to the broadcasters and the market, generally speaking, than to the creators and the artists.
Right.
That is what television is about. Respect equally your clients, the broadcasters, and the artists who make a project unique and successful.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Very, very good point. My last question before I let you go is, do you think you would ever consider being a TV host again?
Well, if it was to present a program about animation, I would be happy to do so with you.
Oh, yeah, you're on. Let's find an agent and we'll go and pitch ourselves. That's a brilliant idea. Thank you so much, Philippe. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I really, really appreciate you taking your time to chat to me and chat to the Festivus audience.
Thank you very much. Your invitation has been for me a big achievement, because I have to confess that I've tried so hard to be recognized in the UK. So I get what I deserve now with you. Thank you so much, Julian.
It's a win-win situation. It's great to see you, Philippe. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Et voila. What a wonderfully positive conversation with a lovely man. And now we must all try to recognise Philippe in the UK more. I know I'll be asking him back again for another podcast chat. Merci Philippe, à bientôt. As always, a massive thanks to Julian Scott for hosting. Information about Film London can be found at filmlondon.org/animation. Well worth a visit. And once again, a huge thank you to Liberry Consulting for all their support in making this podcast series a reality. Check out their industry-related training courses on the Festivus website now. Thanks everyone, and come back soon for more episodes.